The night the tension stayed awake, my girlfriend was breathing slow and even beside me, one arm thrown across my chest like an anchor. I stared at the ceiling fan and thought about how quiet can feel loud when your mind won't shut up. I kept seeing a pause that lasted half a second too long. A look that didn't ask for anything and somehow asked for everything. It started earlier that day at the repair shop 2 blocks off Main, the kind of place that smells like warm metal and old coffee. I dropped my laptop after a long shift and needed it fixed by morning. She ran the counter. Mid-40s, maybe more. Hair pulled back without trying to be neat. Reading glasses perched on her head like she'd forgotten they were there. Her voice was steady in a way that didn't rush or soften just because someone was standing in front of her. She asked what happened. I started explaining, talking too fast, pointing at the cracked hinge like it had personally betrayed me. She didn't interrupt. Just watched my hands, then my face, then the hinge again. When I finished, she nodded once and said, "Leave it with me." Not, "I'll see what I can do." Not, "No promises." Just that. While she filled out the ticket, I noticed the tiny things. The faint line at the corner of her mouth when she focused. The way she held the pen like she'd used the same one for years. The radio behind her hummed some song from another decade, low enough that it felt like a memory more than music. She asked for my number. I hesitated, long enough to be noticed, and then gave it. She didn't look up when she repeated it back, but she got every digit right. When I joked about being surprised, she smiled without showing teeth and said, "I listen." It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't anything. And that made it worse. I turned to leave, then remembered the coffee I'd grabbed on the way in, still sealed, sweating onto the counter. I pushed it toward her without thinking. She paused, looked at the cup, looked at me. For a beat, neither of us moved. The shop felt too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. "I don't take sugar," she said. "It's black," I said too quickly. "I mean, so am I. The coffee. Black." She laughed then. Not loud, not polite. A short, surprised sound that seemed to escape before she could stop it. Her shoulders loosened. She took the cup and wrapped both hands around it like it was cold. "Thanks," she said. "I forget to eat when it's busy." I left after that, but not really. I stood outside longer than I needed to, pretending to check my phone while replaying the way she'd said thanks. The way she'd looked at me like I wasn't a task on a list. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A message saying the hinge was worse than it looked, but she could reinforce it. No extra charge. I typed back something casual and erased it twice. When I finally sent a thank you, she replied with a single word, "Anytime." At home, my girlfriend fell asleep mid-sentence, her head heavy on my shoulder. I carried her to bed, turned off the light, did all the right things. Still, when the room went dark, I saw the repair shop again. The coffee cup between us. The pause. The way she'd listened. I lay there, counting the fan's rotations, wondering why that half second wouldn't let me go, and why, for the first time in a long while, I didn't want it to. I went back 2 days later, telling myself it was practical. The laptop wasn't ready yet. She'd texted that a part was delayed. Still, when I pushed open the door, my chest tightened like I'd been holding my breath since the first visit. It was quieter than before. Afternoon lull. The radio was off. She was at the workbench this time, sleeves rolled up, hair messy, a thin smudge of grease along the side of her thumb. She looked up when she heard the bell, and for a second her face did something unguarded, recognition, maybe, before it settled back into calm. "You're early," she said. "I was nearby," I said. A lie that wasn't exactly false. She gestured to a stool. "If you don't mind waiting." Or, she hesitated, just barely. "If you want to hold the light." I nodded too fast. Took the flashlight from her hand. Our fingers brushed, accidental, quick. She didn't pull away, but she didn't linger either. Just turned back to the open machine, posture straight, attention narrowed, guarded, like she knew how to keep herself small without actually shrinking. I stood close enough to see the tiny veins on the back of her hands as she worked. They trembled when she applied pressure, not from weakness, more like exhaustion held in check. I adjusted the light when she leaned in. She didn't ask, didn't thank me, just trusted I'd notice. Minutes passed without much talking. The hum of the bench lamp, the faint click of metal, I became aware of how carefully she moved, like she'd learned not to waste effort. When she finally spoke, it wasn't about the laptop. "You always look like you're thinking of something else," she said, eyes still on her work. I swallowed. "Is that bad?" "No." A pause. "Just noticeable." She laughed softly after that, almost to herself. It wasn't the surprised laugh from before. This one was tired, worn thin around the edges. I noticed the faint shadow under her eyes, the way she rolled her shoulder like it ached. "Long day?" I asked. She shrugged. "Long years do that." The words hung there. I waited. She kept working, jaw tight, as if she'd said more than intended. After a moment, she exhaled and leaned back, rubbing her temples with the heels of her hands. "I should have closed earlier," she said. "But if I stop, everything catches up." I didn't know what everything meant. I didn't ask. I just angled the light away when she straightened, giving her a second without being watched. When she met my eyes again, there was something different there, not softness, exactly. More like permission had been considered, then denied. She cleared her throat. "You can sit. I've got it from here." I handed her the flashlight. Our fingers touched again, longer this time. Neither of us moved right away. Her grip tightened slightly, like she'd realized it, and couldn't undo it fast enough. "Thanks," she said, quieter than before. I stepped back, took the stool, watched her return to the workbench, shoulders set, distance restored. But as I sat there, the smell of warm metal and old coffee filling the space between us, I couldn't stop thinking about that hesitation, about the moment she almost didn't pull away. The third time, it was raining, not dramatic, not loud, just steady enough to make the streetlights smear and keep people away. She texted that the laptop was ready, added, "I'm staying late anyway." I read that line too many times before I went. The shop felt smaller at night. One lamp on. The rest of the space swallowed by shadow. She had her jacket on, but hadn't zipped it, like she was half committed to leaving. When I walked in, she looked up and said my name without checking the ticket. That did something to me. "Power's been flickering," she said. "If it cuts, don't panic." "I won't," I said. I already was. She slid the laptop across the counter. Our hands met when I took it. This time neither of us pretended it was an accident. She didn't pull away right away. Just looked at the hinge like it might explain why her fingers were still there. "Looks solid," I said. "It is." Then, softer, "I overdid it." I smiled. "You said no extra charge." "I know." A pause. "I don't always mean it." That was the closest thing to a confession either of us had made. I felt something shift, like a door unlocked, but not opened. I leaned back against the counter, close enough that I could smell rain on her jacket, something clean underneath it. She poured herself water from a bottle, drank too fast. Some spilled. She wiped it with her sleeve and laughed under her breath. "Graceful," she said. "Human," I said before thinking. She looked at me then. Really looked. The kind of look that makes you aware of your posture, your breathing, the exact distance between two bodies. She rested her hip against the counter, close enough that if I moved even a little, her phone rang. The sound cut the room in half. She stiffened. Didn't check the screen right away. When she did, her mouth tightened, just for a second. "I have to take this," she said, already turning away. I nodded, stepped back, gave her space that felt like it cost me something. Her voice dropped when she answered. I didn't hear much, just fragments. A name I didn't recognize. A tired no. A longer silence. Then, "I can't do this right now." She hung up and stood there, phone still in her hand, shoulders tense. I watched her breathe through it. Didn't move. Didn't speak. When she finally turned back to me, the guard was up again, but not all the way. "Sorry," she said. "It's fine." "It's not." She shook her head once, like clearing a thought. "I should close." I picked up the laptop, slung the strap over my shoulder. The rain tapped the windows like it was waiting. At the door, I stopped, turned back. She was watching me, arms crossed now, holding herself together. "Hey," I said. "Yeah." I stepped toward her. Not all the way, just enough that the air changed. I wanted to say something honest, something dangerous. Instead, I lifted my hand, almost touched her wrist, and let it fall back to my side. "Thanks," I said. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on my hand long after I lowered it. The next time, There was no excuse. No broken hinge. No delayed part. Just a message from her that said, "If you're around," and nothing else. I stared at it longer than I should have, then walked over like the decision had already been made somewhere else. The shop was closed. Lights off except the one behind the counter. The sign on the door still read back in 10, though it had been flipped hours ago. She stood by the window when I came in, arms folded, watching the street like she was waiting for it to say something first. "You shouldn't be here," she said without turning around. I know. That was the problem. We both knew. She finally faced me. No glasses this time. Her hair loose, falling the way it probably did when she was too tired to care. She looked older like that. Not in a bad way. In a way that made everything feel heavier. "We've crossed something," she said. I didn't answer. If I did, it would have been the wrong thing. She walked to the counter and leaned against it, palms flat, like she needed the support. The silence stretched. Not empty. Full. Pressing in from all sides. "I don't do this," she said quietly. "Whatever this is. I don't let it build." I swallowed. "Then why did you text me?" Her jaw tightened. She looked down at her hands. I noticed a faint tremor she hadn't bothered to hide. "Because I'm tired," she said. "And you look at me like I'm not invisible." That landed harder than anything else had. I shifted my weight, suddenly too aware of how close I was, how easy it would be to step forward and ruin everything in one clean motion. "I'm not trying to cause anything," I said. "I know." She laughed once, short and hollow. "That's worse." She pushed off the counter and took a step toward me, then stopped. The space between us felt deliberate now. Chosen. "I have rules," she said. "I built them after I learned the hard way." "Are they working?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. She looked at me for a long time. The kind of look that strips things down. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but only just. "I don't know who I am around you," she said. "And that scares me more than wanting you." The words hung there, raw and unprotected. I felt my chest tighten, my hands curl into fists at my sides. Everything in me wanted to close the distance, to say something brave or reckless. Instead, I stayed where I was. She nodded once, like I'd passed a test neither of us had named. Then she turned away, busying herself with nothing, giving us both a way out. "Maybe," she said, almost to herself, "we should stop pretending this is just a shop." I watched her back, the quiet strength in her shoulders, and realized that whatever this was, it had already changed us. I thought I knew where the edge was. I was wrong. She didn't say anything when I came in, just handed me a folded piece of paper like it had been sitting in her pocket all day, waiting. The shop smelled cleaner than usual, like she'd wiped everything down just to have something to do with her hands. "I found this," she said. "In the back. Old box." I opened it slowly. It was a note, written in tight, familiar handwriting, not hers. The paper was soft at the creases, worn thin from being unfolded and refolded too many times. "I'll come back when I'm ready to be better," it read. No name. Just a date from years ago. "I never threw it away," she said. "Didn't mean to keep it either." I looked up. She was watching my face, not the note. Measuring something. "Who was it?" I asked. She hesitated, then shrugged like it didn't matter. "Someone who promised a lot." A pause. "Someone I waited for longer than I should have." The words settled between us. Not sharp. Heavy. I folded the note carefully and set it back on the counter like it might break if I wasn't gentle. "I didn't know," I said. "You weren't supposed to." She leaned back against the workbench, crossed her arms. You stand the same way he did when he didn't know what to say." That shouldn't have mattered. It did. "I'm not him," I said quietly. "I know." She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were clearer. Sadder. "That's the problem." She moved past me toward the back room. I followed, unsure why, like my body was already committed. She stopped at a shelf and pulled out an old photo. Two people sitting on the floor of this same shop when it still looked unfinished. Younger. Happier. Her smile was wider then. "He left before it was done," she said. "Before anything was." I handed the photo back. Our fingers touched. She didn't pull away this time. Didn't tighten her grip either. Just let the contact exist. "I don't want to be a reminder," I said. She shook her head. "You're not." A breath. You're worse. I waited. You make me think about who I was before I learned how to be careful, she said. And I don't know what to do with that. The room felt smaller, warmer. I could hear my own pulse. I wanted to say something reassuring, something clean. Instead, honesty showed up first. I think about you when I shouldn't, I said. Her throat moved when she swallowed. She nodded once, like she'd expected that answer. Me too, she said. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just the truth, sitting there between us like a third presence. She stepped back then. Just a half step. Enough to remind us both that nothing had actually happened. But when she turned away, she left the photo on the counter. And when I left the shop a few minutes later, I realized I hadn't stopped thinking about the way her hand stayed warm long after I let go. The night it finally settled wasn't dramatic. No rain. No music playing from another room. Just the low hum of the lights and the quiet understanding that neither of us had anywhere else to be. She didn't text this time. I showed up anyway. The door was unlocked like she'd expected me, even if she hadn't decided what that meant yet. She was sitting on the stool behind the counter, not working. Just sitting. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers loosely intertwined, like she'd already let go of something heavy. You don't have to stay, she said when she saw me. I know. That was our language now. I leaned against the counter, keeping distance out of habit more than fear. The space between us didn't feel charged anymore. It felt acknowledged. I keep trying to name this, she said. And every name feels wrong. I watched the way she spoke, slow, careful, like she was choosing each word not to protect me, but herself. Maybe it doesn't need one, I said. She nodded. A small nod. Relief, maybe. Or surrender. I spent a long time believing wanting something was the same as ruining it, she said. So I stopped wanting. Or I thought I did. Her eyes met mine then. Not searching. Just open. And you didn't ask for any of this, she added. I didn't stop it either, I said. That earned a quiet smile. Not happy. Honest. She stood and came around the counter. Not close at first. Then closer. When she stopped, her shoulder brushed my arm. Not accidental, not intentional enough to retreat from. Just there. We stood like that for a while. Breathing. Existing in the same small space without pretending it was neutral. I'm scared, she said. Not as a warning. Just a fact. Me too. She reached out then. Took my hand. Her grip wasn't firm. It wasn't tentative either. It was steady, like she was checking something she already knew was real. Nothing rushed in me. No rush of triumph. Just calm. Like something that had been leaning finally found its balance. She rested her forehead against my shoulder. Not a collapse. A decision. I don't want to disappear from this, she said softly. Or from you. You don't have to, I said. Not tonight. She exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding that breath for years. We didn't kiss. We didn't promise anything. We just stood there, hands linked, the shop quiet around us, the world outside continuing without permission. After a while, she pulled back just enough to look at me. We'll go slow, she said. We already are, I replied. That made her laugh. Real this time. Tired, warm, unmistakably present. When I left, the door locked behind me the way it always had. But this time, the quiet followed me without tension, without confusion, just the certainty that whatever came next wouldn't be an accident. I'm telling this from a little distance now, not years, just enough time for the sharp edges to dull and the quiet truths to stay. Nothing exploded after that night. That's what surprised me most. There was no dramatic fallout, no moment where everything snapped into place. We kept waking up, kept going to work, kept choosing small things. And somehow, those small things added up. She didn't become softer. If anything, she became clearer, more herself. She stopped apologizing for needing space, and I stopped mistaking distance for rejection. We learned the shape of each other's silences. When to sit, when to leave, when to reach out without pulling. I changed too. I noticed it in the way I listened, not just to her, but to myself. I stopped pretending that wanting something meant I was entitled to it. I learned how to wait without resentment, how to hold something gently instead of gripping it until it broke. There were mornings in the shop before it opened, Comptree opened, lights spilling through the front window, the radio low. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just stood side by side, drinking coffee that went cold, sharing the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. Sometimes our hands found each other. Sometimes they didn't. Both felt honest. What I learned, what I didn't know before, is that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up as relief, as recognition, as the absence of pretending. She once told me she used to believe love was something you survived. Now she says it's something you practice. I think that's the most adult thing I've ever heard. We never made promises we couldn't keep. We made choices instead. To stay present. To speak when it mattered. To stop hiding behind what was easy or expected. And yes, there were complications. There always are. But they didn't define us. They just asked us to be more careful, more awake. The tension that once kept me up at night didn't disappear. It changed. It softened into something steady. Something that didn't need to shout to be real. When I think back to that first night, lying next to someone else, staring at the ceiling, haunted by a pause that wouldn't let me go, I understand it differently now. It wasn't betrayal. It was a warning that something unfinished had found me, and that I was finally ready to listen. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?